And I heard something this morning and I was like, whoa. Okay, that's news. The WNBA owners have a new offer on the table. And I got to tell you, if the players don't take this offer, they're idiots. They're idiots. There's no excuses. Because by the time you get to the final year of this offer, the final year of this deal that's on the table, the max players are making what you're making in Project B, $2 million.
The WNBA could be facing extinction within the next 6 months. And before this gets brushed off as clickbait or criticism, understand this isn't speculation from a fan or commentator. The warning comes from David Sampson, a former Major League Baseball team president with 16 years of front office experience, who said it plainly on national radio. Sampson, who previously ran the Miami Marlins and now co-hosts a sports business show with ESPN's former CEO, knows exactly how leagues make and lose money. His message was clear: WNBA owners are willing to pull the plug entirely if negotiations collapse. What makes the situation even more precarious is that players have just voted to authorize a strike. They're threatening to walk away from the richest proposal the league has ever put on the table, a deal that would see max salaries rise to $2 million by the final year. Instead of momentum, the league is teetering on the edge.
Sampson said players are not going to get it, and the owners will end the WNBA.
Really trying to get a landing spot for tons of issues, not just housing or minimums or tagging a percentage of revenue.
If the players are not going to move on a revenue split versus derive revenue share off of a fixed number, what is your opinion on what happens?
Maybe the end of the WNBA. The players will move. There's not going to be a fixed number. It doesn't make sense to me for the WNBA to demand that, for the players to demand that right now. I understand. The biggest thing they did wrong, they said this is their moment. And so they've put a lot of pressure on themselves to make huge changes in the collective bargaining agreement because this is their moment. What you try to do is make incremental benefits through the course of multiple agreements.
That's exactly what your boy said.
Let's be clear about what's really happening here, because this situation is spiraling fast. The WNBA Players Association has officially authorized a strike, meaning they can shut everything down at any moment. No games. No season. No league activity. Right now, the players are applying maximum pressure, but according to David Sampson, the owners are no longer bluffing. They're prepared to walk away. The offer currently on the table is unprecedented for the WNBA, a maximum base salary of $1 million by 2026, with the potential to reach $1.3 million through revenue sharing. For context, the current max salary sits at just $249,000. This isn't a minor dispute, it's a standoff that could decide the league's future.
The Lee Bart Show. Hope I see.
I don't think Adam Silver has any interest in pegging it to a percentage at all. And Adam Silver addressed the media during the League Cup final in Vegas and said that he'll get involved if they want him to. But here's the surprise. He's been involved from the beginning. What he was saying is, will I go to the actual table? You don't need the commissioner of the NBA to be at this table at any time. But what they've done is they've extended the deadline first by 30 days, 40 days. So it's been a total of 70 days, which all you're doing is delaying a work stoppage. You want to get to that work stoppage because that's a legal term of art. You want to get to some sort of lockout or strike so then it can go to the next stage of these negotiations.
So let's put this into perspective, because the numbers are staggering. We're talking about quadrupling salaries, not doubling, not incremental growth, but a massive leap. The average salary would explode from roughly $120,000 to over $530,000 in year one, then climb to nearly $770,000 over the life of the agreement. The proposed minimum salary would be $250,000. Read that again. A $250,000 minimum for a league that has never turned a profit in 28 years. Not once. For decades, the NBA has propped up the WNBA with tens of millions of dollars annually, keeping it afloat. And now, despite the most generous offer in league history, players are threatening to strike because it still isn't enough. David Sampson said something on the Dan Le Batard show that should send chills through every locker room. If players push for NBA-style revenue sharing, he said, the league will end. Not hypothetically. Not eventually. End. And this isn't some random pundit, this is a man who ran a professional sports franchise for 16 years.
To this proposal, it starts with us, the fans. If the fans are not engaged with what you have, and that means buying merch, that means going to games, watching the games, most definitely watching the game, because that ad revenue that the league make, each team get a piece of that. And if people are not watching the games to generate those large $100 million salaries and stuff that they see their, other players make in the NBA, it's just going to be hard to deal with, man, because they're not generating that type of revenue.
Here's where this situation turns completely absurd. The players are now demanding full NBA-style revenue sharing. In the NBA, that means a 50-50 split of basketball-related income between players and owners. On the surface, that sounds reasonable until you look at reality. The NBA generates over $10 billion a year. The WNBA, meanwhile, loses money every single season. You cannot split revenue that doesn't exist. You can't demand 50% of losses. David Sampson called this out directly. He said the players made a massive mistake by declaring this their moment. By doing that, they boxed themselves into demanding everything at once: housing stipends, charter flights, massive salary jumps, and full revenue sharing, despite the league bleeding cash. Sampson's point was simple but brutal: smart negotiations are incremental. Take the major salary increase now, secure stability, then build toward more over future agreements. When you demand everything immediately, you risk walking away with nothing at all.
The reports are, I think the WNBA's stance is 15%. There is a percentage they're pegging it to. It's 15%. But the way they're getting around it is by saying, okay, and we'll have higher maximums for the top tier players. But also within that, we're going to take away some of the benefits, because all of these proposals up till now have had, well, this is 30% of revenues minus the benefits paid out, like housing and transportation and all that. Right. So what they're trying to
lock the deal in now. Then come back in 3 years, after the owners have actually had time to make money from the new media rights agreement, and negotiate again. That's how smart unions operate. That's how smart unions operate. That's exactly how NBA players built their leverage, through patience, incremental gains, and compound growth. Step by step. But WNBA players are trying to skip straight to the finish line. And this is why the owners are officially fed up. According to David Sampson, the owners want to be repaid for decades of losses. We're talking 28 straight years, hundreds of millions of dollars poured into a league that has never turned a profit. NBA owners, many of whom also own WNBA teams, have subsidized this league since 1997. They stayed patient. They stayed supportive. They secured a massive new media rights deal and increased investment. And now, after all that, the players are threatening to strike. Here's what's really at stake. Alternative leagues. Project B unrivaled. Without a collective bargaining agreement, every WNBA player is essentially a free agent. And there are well-capitalized investors watching closely. Sampson said it outright: this is the perfect moment to launch a competing league, poach the stars, and replace the WNBA entirely. If that happens, the league doesn't survive, not because of sexism or lack of support, but because of self-inflicted decisions.
If the players are not going to move on a revenue split versus derive revenue share off of a fixed number, what is your opinion on what happens?
Maybe the end of the WNBA. The players will move. Yep. There's not going to be a fixed number. It doesn't make sense to me for the WNBA to demand that, for the players to demand that right now. I understand. The biggest thing they did wrong, they said this is their moment. And so they've put a lot of pressure on themselves to make huge changes in the collective bargaining agreement because this is their moment, What you try to do is make incremental benefits through the course of multiple agreements. And so I don't think they should have gone for everything they're going for right now, because they put themselves in a corner where they feel like they have to get it or it's like a major loss.
It ends because the players got greedy and destroyed their own league. That's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to say out loud. If this collapses, Adam Silver and the NBA will wash their hands of it and move on. 28 years of building a league gone, not because of lack of opportunity, but because the players refused a deal that would have quadrupled their salaries. And this is where Sampson said something that made people furious, because it hit too close to home. He asked a simple question: if the WNBA folded tomorrow, who would actually care? Yes, the league had record games last season. About 2.5 million viewers tuned in. That sounds impressive until you put it in context. The NBA Finals averaged over 11 million viewers. The WNBA's biggest moments are pulling numbers comparable to a random Tuesday night NBA regular season game. Sampson's point wasn't cruel, it was factual. Unpopular to who? If the league disappeared, would mainstream America notice beyond a brief social media cycle? Or would it quietly become another forgotten experiment in sports history? These are hard questions, but they're real ones. And the fact that a longtime sports executive is willing to ask them publicly should terrify every WNBA player. Because here's the reality. The WNBA just had its best season ever in 2024. Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, sold-out arenas, record ratings, corporate sponsors finally lining up. This was supposed to be the breakthrough, the turning point toward financial stability. And instead of building on that momentum, the players chose brinkmanship. A strike threat. Demands for full revenue sharing from a league that still loses money. At the exact moment when things are finally trending upward, they're willing to risk burning it all down. That's not leverage. That's self-destruction.
In a culture where it will be very unpopular if the WNBA does what you're saying, how probable is that?
It'll be unpopular if the WNBA folds. Unpopular to who? To the large majority of the... I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. If what you're saying that there are expansion fees paid and they're trying to expand and they've got broadcast deals that were totally pinned to the NBA deals, is that what you mean by unpopular? What I'm telling you is that if the players get too greedy, it will be the end of the WNBA. That's not the end of the world for them. Because they have options.
I don't hear anyone saying, though, that we're on the precipice of it sort of collapsing and needing to reinvent itself.
Absolute insanity. That's the only way to describe what's happening right now. According to David Sampson, the former Miami Marlins president who ran a professional sports franchise for 16 years, the WNBA players are playing a dangerous game and they may not even realize how close they are to losing everything. Sampson has been blunt about it. He believes the players will eventually cave, and he says it confidently. In his view, this strike authorization isn't about actually walking away. It's posturing. It's leverage theater. It's a way to look tough publicly before quietly accepting the most lucrative deal in league history. And honestly, that makes sense, because what's the real alternative here? Shut the league down? Walk away from guaranteed contracts? Give up historic salary increases to go play overseas for less money? Less stability, and shorter careers? When you strip away the slogans and social media noise, the options are grim. But here's the truly scary part. What if they don't cave? What if the players actually believe their own hype after last season? What if they convince themselves that record ratings and sold-out arenas mean they now control the entire negotiation? If that happens, we could be watching the slow-motion collapse of the WNBA, not because fans abandoned it, not because the product failed on the court, but because the players destroyed it at the bargaining table. Let's take a sober look at the offer on the table. By the end of this deal, max players could earn up to $2 million annually. The average salary would rise to around $770,000. The minimum salary would jump to $250,000. These are not symbolic raises. These are life-altering numbers. This is wealth-building money in a sport where careers are short, injuries are common, and financial security is never guaranteed. Compare that to where things stand right now. The current maximum salary sits around $249,000. Many players still work off-season jobs. Many go overseas simply to make ends meet. The average salary barely cracks 6 figures. The league is offering to multiply those numbers 5 or 6 times. In almost any industry, that would be celebrated as a massive win. And yet, the players are saying it's not enough. Why? Because they want NBA-style revenue sharing. They want a 50-50 split, just like the NBA. They want to be paid like LeBron James and Stephen Curry. The problem with that comparison should be obvious. LeBron and Steph play in a league that generates over $10 billion per year. The WNBA generates roughly $200 million, and most of that revenue is immediately consumed by operating costs. There is no giant profit pool waiting to be divided. You cannot split money that doesn't exist. This leads us to the most uncomfortable truth of all, one that almost no one in mainstream sports media wants to say out loud. The WNBA has never been a profitable business. Not once. In its entire 28-year existence, the league has lost money every single year. It survives because the NBA subsidizes it. Tens of millions of dollars annually. Not because it's a financial powerhouse, but because it aligns with broader social, cultural, and corporate values. That support, however, is not unconditional. Adam Silver has been one of the WNBA's strongest advocates. He's increased investment. He's helped secure better media deals. He's pushed marketing, visibility, and infrastructure. But Adam Silver is also a businessman. And businessmen don't keep writing checks forever when the math stops making sense. If the players' demands cross into financial fantasy, the support disappears. David Sampson made that clear. If the players continue pushing for NBA-style revenue sharing in a league that loses money, the owners may simply walk away. Not out of spite. Not out of sexism. But out of basic business reality. At some point, you stop subsidizing losses. And that's where alternative leagues enter the conversation. Sampson specifically mentioned ventures like Project B, which are reportedly offering massive salaries backed by venture capital. On the surface, that sounds tempting. Big checks. Big promises. Big headlines. But history tells us how this story usually ends. The XFL collapsed twice, before finally limping back in a reduced form. The AAF didn't even last a full season. Big Three basketball barely survives. Venture-funded sports leagues burn cash quickly, and when investors stop believing, the money vanishes overnight. Even if players get paid $2 million for one season, what happens in year 2 when the funding dries up? And if the league collapses because players rejected a deal that quadrupled salaries, public sympathy will not be on their side. Fair or not, most casual fans will say the players got greedy and killed their own league. That narrative would stick, and once it does, rebuilding becomes nearly impossible. What makes this entire situation even more frustrating is the timing. The WNBA finally had momentum. Record ratings. Sold-out arenas. Corporate sponsors. Rookies like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese bringing new fans. The product on the court was better than ever. And instead of riding that wave, the league is flirting with self-destruction over money that doesn't exist yet. This negotiation was mishandled from the beginning. Demanding everything at once leaves no room to negotiate. Billionaires do not respond well to ultimatums. Other unions learned that lesson the hard way. The NFL Players Association picks battles. They prioritize. They move incrementally. The WNBA players did not. From the owner's perspective, the message is simple: take this generous deal or find another job. And when faced with that reality, the players will likely fold because they have no better option. My prediction? The deal gets accepted. The players spin it as a victory. The media applauds. Everyone pretends the league wasn't inches from collapse. But don't be fooled, this was a warning shot. The owners showed they're willing to shut it down if pushed too far. The WNBA is at a crossroads. One path leads to sustainable growth, rising salaries, and long-term stability. The other leads to collapse, unemployment, and regret. Based on everything we've seen, the choice should be obvious. Now the question is, will the players see it in time? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this story is far from over.